Who knows why, but Gen Z is aging pretty poorly. I mean, I'm 23. I look 23 or younger. So I don't think that that's the case for me. I look the same way I've looked since I was like 16, 18. But we're going to be watching a video on Gen Z's aging epidemic. Let's figure out what the people are saying. Let's figure out whether or not I'm Unk.
I don't remember how the conversation got to this point, but I eventually said something like, I graduated high school in 2015. And after that, everyone on my team started referring to me as Unk. Unk? Really, man? I was born in 1997. I'm only 28 years old. I'm still considered Gen Z. They quizzed me on new internet acronyms like SYBAU, which stands for Shut Your Ass Up, and were shocked that I was able to guess right. I'd have to assume that younger generations have always thought people in their late 20s are way older than they actually are, but it feels like Gen Z, maybe more than previous generations, see aging and getting old as a thing to be avoided at all costs. And ironically enough,
Absolutely. I think one of the things is we think that everything that is valuable in life should be had and is in youth. Like, all we see is the 0.001% of people our age who are multi millionaires living it up and enjoying their lives. And we also came up in the 2016 SoundCloud area where literally 16-year-olds were making music on SoundCloud, blowing up, getting famous. There's been this overglorification of our youthful years, which can only happen if the skill set that you have isn't one that requires 10 years, a doctor's worth of education, a certain amount of time to actually foster and create said skill set, which is the case for the vast majority of humans. Because if you want to be of genuine value to somebody, you have to go through the school, the training, the life experience in order to get there and get that thing. Meaning that your most useful point of yourself, your prime in terms of your career and your ability to add value to the world, inevitably will happen when you're older, which is exactly against what we've seen, right? Because people are making way more money than we would even make in a lot of cases after acquiring and working on all these skills.
sentiments are being shared online about Gen Z looking much older than millennials.
I'm 25. I'm not even gonna pretend like I look like what a 25-year-old should look like.
I don't like that the general opinion is fact because a few popular media outlets reported on it and then a bunch of creators decided to make videos for higher engagement, kind of like me. So why don't we actually see what's going on with ageism and aging in Gen Z? How beauty standards have shifted, how technology and science created new possibilities and unrealistic expectations for immortality, and why some Gen Z might feel immense pressure to rack up millions before they reach 18. Can we all agree that beauty standards are absolutely cooked? Dudes will see a picture of Ice Spice without makeup, then call her chopped with a dead rose emoji, not realizing they just exposed themselves as never having stayed the night with a woman before. I'm not saying you have to find every celebrity attractive, but if you're a guy and every picture you see of a woman without makeup leaves you repulsed,
I mean, in that individual picture, she looked chopped. It was a bad angle. It was a lot of things adding together to make her look chopped in that photo. But we all know she isn't. So, I mean, yeah, whoever left the comment is a little incel. But that particular photo, you know, it wasn't her. It wasn't her best work. We'll say that. We'll say that. It's not her best work.
you've either let social media completely warp your standards, or you might just like men. Sorry to break that to you. What we frequently choose to consume through our eyes and ears drastically affects how we perceive the world and establishes a baseline level of expectations for each of those things. If you grow up in a culture where people say hi to you as you walk by them, it will feel weird when someone doesn't. If you get most of your dopamine from highly stimulating sources, any slow, monotonous task is going to feel painful. And if you spend most of your time engaging with humans on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok, where people post how they look 1% of the time, often with filters and touch-ups included, anytime you aren't on those platforms, average or even objectively very attractive people are just going to look okay to you. No other generation has dealt with this at the scale at which it is present today. The pillars of beauty, influencers and celebrities spamming Botox and other injections, are quietly deciding that this is what young people should aspire to look like. And as a result, these treatments have
People are such sheep that even with knowing this, right, even being aware of the fact that these are crazy beauty standards, that this isn't what a beautiful woman looks like, they still are influenced by it. And that's a way that the world gets tricked, or especially intelligent people get tricked. You can still be tricked by the thing, even if you're aware of the rules guarding or monitoring the thing. The most evident place in that, or the most evident place that this exists, is in the dating world. You can learn 1,000 different things from 1,000 different coaches on how to apparently seduce any woman you ever see. But in reality, if those techniques don't work for you, or if you can't be this fake human being who needs to do these things in order to attract women, it doesn't matter. Like, you can learn all the techniques you want, they don't matter because you can't do them yourself. So, yeah.
to become socially acceptable for people who aren't even old enough to get a tattoo. This is a big reason we are seeing the sentiment shared that Gen Z is not aging well, especially in regards to women. There are countless examples of women in their late teens and early 20s getting Botox and lip filler to enhance their appearance, either too young to understand the consequences or too young to care. Botox comes with a host of side effects, including vision problems, muscle weakness, and even drooping eyelids for weeks after injection. And the thing about these treatments is they don't even necessarily give you the beauty you were striving for. They just make you look older than you actually are. The pressure to look both youthful but mature enough to have a sophisticated look instead of a childish look is certainly something young people feel now more than ever, and it's even spread to guys too in the form of looks maxing. We got this clavicular guy I brought up a couple videos ago promoting Botox,
Crazy.
injecting testosterone and bone smashing to improve your jawline. Not familiar with bone smashing, you say? This is a pseudoscientific protocol in which one repeatedly hits their cheekbones with a hard object to create microfractures that are supposed to help them grow back bigger.
Dude is literally giving himself mini concussions right here. He's slowly just racking up CTE damage. The bill has to get paid. The bill will get paid sooner or later.
And that's another thing indicative of youth that the youth clearly wants to get rid of: chubby cheeks. When we're young, fat in the face is evenly distributed, but it has pockets that plump up in places like the forehead and the cheeks. But what's a beauty standard that's considered highly aspirational now? Hollow cheeks. So we have teenagers who watch videos like this, a video that's already gotten 1 million views in 3 weeks, doing gua sha, 1 million different facial treatments, and maybe even Ozempic just to reach a face that was normally reserved for old people. Having more fat in your face actually fills out wrinkles and fine lines, making them less noticeable and making you look younger. So the sad irony is that in the process of pursuing eternal youth, Gen Z ends up looking older than if they were just to let their bodies naturally age, further contributing to their body image issues. Another factor that might play a role in this idea of aging being bad is, weirdly, how much emphasis we're placing on biohacking and optimization. One person leading this cause I want to talk about is Brian Johnson. Now, I think Brian's a great guy.
Don't hate on
and
Brian
promoted
now.
some amazing protocols to help people live healthier, happier lives. But what I don't necessarily agree with him on is the way that he talks about immortality.
Let me ask you this: with that, do you actually think it might be that you won't die at all, or just, you're looking to extend your lifestyle or lifetime beyond what now we consider possible?
Yeah, I think it's legitimately the first time any human in history could say with a straight face, we may be the first generation to not die.
How does that statement make you feel? I don't know about you, but the idea of living forever just sucks. Unless you absolutely hate the idea of getting...
This is such a dumb point that he's making right now. It is such a dumb point. If you achieve immortality to where you don't age, right? That doesn't mean that you don't die. Immortality is not the fictional sense of, oh man, I'm impenetrable. If I get thrown into the vacuum of space, I won't die. It means you can live to 200, maybe 150, maybe 300. You can decide when you die. You just have to go kill yourself. You just have to go die. Oh, I can't say that word on YouTube. I'm sorry. But immortality isn't the curse of being a vampire. You can decide when you're done. But that's the freedom. That's the choice that comes if we're able to achieve immortality. The fact that a scientist can complete his great work and then decide, okay, I've seen enough of this world. Allow me to pass on. Without that, you don't know when you're going to die. Without that, it can happen at any point in time. Most people won't reach 75. And the people who reach 100, they reach 100, they're in a horrible state. Their bodies aren't as functional as they used to be in the past. It's about the choice. It's about being able to choose when you die, not actual immortality. I can guarantee you, Brian, if he actually achieves this, won't live to be 1,000. But he'll be able to decide maybe at 750, maybe at 500, maybe at 300. It's a wrap for him. It's time to end things.
Old and you have an intense fear of it, I can't see why you would want to extend your lifespan indefinitely. What I'm picturing right now is like an extremely senile guy in a robo suit. He's just like drooling at the lips, and half of his brain is just like digitized at this point to keep him alive. And this is a huge problem I have with the longevity industry. A lot of the time, it's not focused on treating aging with acceptance and grace, but rather something to be avoided at all costs.
I agree with that.
A culture of people who see getting old as taboo to talk about and confront. There's a consensus online that millennials were, on average, much more optimistic in a certain period of their youth than Gen Z is. This is portrayed in the many short-form clips I've been receiving on my feed about what millennial optimism looked like around 2014 to 2016. Even though millennials grew up in a time similar to the present, where America was still recovering from the housing crisis and college tuition was crazy, there was a general feeling that things were getting better and were going to continue to get better, especially in the dawn of the smartphone era. The culture of the internet and social media was fun and experimental, contributing to these feelings of lightheartedness and hope. Though I do think some of this is just a romanticization of the past. We tend to cling to things that remind us of our innocence through low-quality pictures and videos. But if we contrast that to today, it's hard to think about what that romanticization, what that era is going to look like for Gen Z. It'll probably still happen, but Gen Z are reporting the highest levels of anxiety and depression of any generation, which I do think plays a part in looking older than you actually are. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that Gen Z is experiencing an unprecedented amount of bad news at an extremely unnatural frequency. I keep bringing up this article and study, and I'll probably bring it up again, but this National Geographic article about doom scrolling cites a study which shows that watching a traumatic event through social media for a few hours a day evokes the same symptoms of PTSD as the individuals who were actually at the event. In fact, the ones who watched the event repeatedly on their phones experienced more symptoms. You gotta understand that our brains contain these things called mirror neurons. These are cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we watch someone else perform that same action. In a sense, the brain responds as if we're doing the thing ourselves. So when we watch a horrific incident unfold, our mirror neurons react as if we are at the incident, which causes that extreme distress you feel when you're looking at pixels on a screen that captured the incident. And then there's just everything else that they have to remove themselves from that has been psychologically engineered to keep you addicted and fatigued. Junk food, gambling being everywhere, bad news that makes the world seem worse than it is, but it also actually kind of is sometimes, bombarding their eyes with blue light instead of natural movement, these can all contribute to quicker aging. According to the CDC, from 2007 to 2013, just under 1/3 of teens reported getting at least 8 hours of sleep per night. In 2015, that number began to fall, and by 2019, only 22.1% of teens were meeting that threshold. These trends are inversely correlated with time spent on a computer and phone per day, which checks out based on what we know. Another study from 2025 wanted to measure the average number of hours slept per night among adolescents and how that affected their mental health. And they found that 16 to 18-year-olds on average report getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night, and that those who got less sleep on average reported much worse mental health outcomes. I think most of us know sleep is important, but I still think many of us vastly underestimate how important it is when it comes to long-term health. Gen Z are in the trenches of what I'd argue is the hardest psychological warfare any young generation has ever gone through, and that might start to reflect itself in their external appearance. But like a lot of this stuff, I don't want to definitively say that this is going to lead to Gen Z looking older, and I'll touch upon that a little bit more at the end of the video. Before I do that though, I want to address one final thing: the expectations that Gen Z hold for themselves and that older generations hold for them. Now, like I said previously, I think every young generation has a cohort of people who are scared of the idea of getting old, particularly when it comes to getting a job and having responsibilities, not just wrinkles. But there's also a sense that Gen Z aren't meeting the expectations of both their ancestors and what's being promoted on social media, causing more fear than necessary around growing
Absolutely.
old. For most of modern history, the expectations for what you should have accomplished by a certain age were pretty straightforward. People graduated high school, maybe went to college, got a job, got married, and bought a home. These milestones were treated as fixed checkboxes on a timeline that everyone was supposed to follow, and older generations still talk about them as if they're absolute truths rather than artifacts of a very specific economic window. But as most of us know, Gen Z inherited a very different reality. Wages stagnated while college tuition and housing prices skyrocketed. Entry-level jobs now demand 5 years of entry-level experience, and the idea of buying a home in your early 20s is so unrealistic that it's basically turned into a meme. But older people are telling them, when I was your age, I already had a house and 2 kids, and that gap between expectation and reality creates a ton of shame. Shame is one of the biggest drivers behind the fear of aging, because if you already feel behind at age 18, then every decade that precedes it is gonna feel like a deadline you're sprinting towards that you'll never be able to meet. And at the same time, Gen Z is bombarded with a completely different set of expectations that older generations didn't really have to deal with. The internet created an entirely new class of ultra-successful teenagers who earn more in a year than most people will see in a decade. The moment you open TikTok or YouTube, you're reminded that someone your age or younger has already made millions, or bought a penthouse, or founded a startup, or built an entire empire out of nothing but their charisma and an iPhone. And even if you logically know that these people represent a fraction of a percentage of the population, it's still gonna affect you because this is usually what's gonna be promoted the most on social media as well. So now you have two competing pressures suffocating the generation from both sides. You have older people who are telling them that they're not hitting their milestones fast enough, while they also have younger people online telling them that they aren't hitting their milestones fast enough. And that can make getting older feel terrifying. I get it, okay? Not being able to recover as quickly after binge drinking on the weekends, or getting strange pains in your back or shoulders, and not being at the level of success you thought you'd be at by this age is scary. But if you let that fear guide your decisions, you will only carry more regrets by the time you get to the age that can actually be considered old. Be honest with yourself. At the end of your life, do you think you're gonna look back and say, man, I wish I would have delayed my aging through artificial means? Do you think you're gonna say, I wish I would have started a crypto scam and lived in a penthouse in LA with people who are barely...
For the first one, yes, I do think like his points against trying to like make sure you don't age quickly are dumb. What Brian is doing, the guy he showed who's trying to achieve immortality, is different from these other people who are just getting Botox and stuff and ruining their health to try and look younger. There's a difference between trying to look younger and actually having a younger biological age, which is what he's focused on, versus all these other Gen Zers. And yes, I do think people that are maybe 55, or the people who die before they reach 40, who are extremely overweight, for example, I do think on their deathbed they think, man, I wish I would have done some things to increase my longevity, to increase the amount of time I could have on this earth. I do think that the people who are in their 60s, maybe the people with throat cancer as a result of smoking too much, will say, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have smoked so much. Maybe I would have had another 10 years. Like, obviously, that's very specific examples of people who have clear things they can do to change their lives, but we all have those things. We all have these things that are aging us, killing us, and we have the ability to stop them or replace them with something better so that we don't age and die faster than we're supposed to. And I don't think that idea is bad. And especially for Gen Z, if we're aware as Gen Z of all these things that are aging us, all these things that are hurting us, it is extremely important. It's extremely important that we focus on trying to make ourselves stay as youthful as possible, trying to make sure we're moving as much as possible, making sure that we're working our joints out so we don't hear creaks, making sure that we're going on runs, we're keeping up our cardiovascular health. This is very important. I mean, it's not something to just be thrown away. And there's something to be said about, living a full life and allowing yourself to self-destruct. There's something, glorious and romantic about that. But for the person who wants to live long, or for the person on their deathbed, I do think that they will consider the things that they could have done to live longer, especially if it's something that they actually could have changed. That's all.
My friends? Or are you going to say, I wish I would have allowed myself to age gracefully and used the natural process of aging for growth? You see, aging and being old is not something to be afraid of. It is, as David Bowie put it, an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. And if you impede upon that, either through endless facelifts,
that's
or
crazy,
responsibilities and burdens, you rob yourself of the unique development that is supposed to occur in every human. I'm not saying that all forms of delaying aging are inherently bad and that we shouldn't make strides to ensure that everyone feels healthier and is less prone to illness. What I am saying is that there will come a point where your body inevitably starts to give out. I'm 28 years old and I'm already experiencing a little bit of pain in my middle finger on my right hand from using my...
The question there, though, is should we do things now to avoid that? And the answer is yes. So it's kind of contradictory.
Mouse too much. And I'll try to do what I can to stop that from happening or even reverse this pain, but I know there'll come a point where I can't use my hands in the way that maybe I could have when I was this age right now, and I've come to accept that. Why? Because at least I used these hands to create, to put myself through voluntary suffering and stress and push myself and carry burdens that ultimately led to me discovering who I was and what I'm capable of. Without taxing my body in that way, while of course taking care of it through
I see
recovery,
you.
I would not be nearly as confident, purposeful, and fulfilled and at peace as I am today.
He's lost a lot of weight. Dang, he's looking cut. In his past videos, he's kind of chubby. Hey, shout out to you, Cole.
Is the result of the people who decided to maturate and do the things that aged them. But you somehow think that scar on your hip or that incoming wrinkle on your forehead or that 18-year-old online who sells courses about how to sell courses is indicative that time is running out for you and it's just over. No, you don't have forever. Your body will start slowing down one day. But accepting that fact while working to minimize its impact is what makes you resilient, not denying it for as long as possible.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be terrified of growing old. You should be terrified of remaining the same. And one more thing, because I said I was going to bring it up even though it destroys the dramatic ending here, I do think that Gen Z looking older is being a little bit blown out of proportion. Yes, I think what I brought up...
Oh, sorry about that.
About the fear of aging and all these...
It's definitely being blown out of proportion. Oh, I'm dying. It's definitely being blown out of proportion. But there are a bunch of Gen Zers that look old. All the stress, all the anxiety, he didn't really touch on that. All these other factors are resulting in Gen Z looking older than they should be. Just generally being more stressed out, more anxiety ridden, more depression throughout our generation. So I don't think that that's like a far stretch. Yes, we are looking older. Yes, it does seem like our biological ages are probably older than our parents' equivalent at our age. So there's there's no absolute denying of it. Again, this wasn't a very scientific video. He didn't pull up too much or talk about that specifically. He more talked about the philosophy of aging, and I've given my opinion on that. That's all. You have a good day.